Today's presenter is Crystal Woerly. She is the Director of Public Relations here at Weatherford College. I have the pleasure of working with her every day.
He's my
And
boss.
so, I don't know why I have this, because I know all this stuff.
I didn't know you were introducing me.
She has a bachelor's degree in journalism from the University of North Texas, and then recently a master's degree in communication studies from Tarleton State University. I believe December? June.
Last year.
June of last year. She's a Weatherford College graduate. She's a Weatherford native. She has worked here at WC for 6 years. Before that, she spent a decade working in the field of journalism, writing stories, taking photos, laying out publications, updating websites, and running social media profiles, something that she does for Weatherford College to this day. And so she still does many of those things and added more and more responsibility with a very, very successful social media profile. So please welcome Crystal Woerly.
I'm glad it's a smaller group. I think if the room was full like this presentation, I'd be really nervous. So, rock, paper, internet. We're starting back at the very beginning with cave drawings. They were our first type of communication. It was very localized, though. You had to actually go to the cave. There was no taking a picture with your cell phone and posting it up on Instagram or sending it as a snap to your friend to see. So we've come a long way since then. But one thing to remember here is that communication is central to our lives. It's always been central to our lives. The way that we communicate has just evolved over many millennia to what it is today. So, second on here we have smoke signals. That was our first form of long distance communication. And then many years later came the printing press. And this threw people, the older generation, really threw them off. What's this new modern thing? Because there's always someone who hates the new technology that comes along. They thought that it was going to undermine the good way things have always been. What's it going to do to these poor monks who were transcribing books by hand? It's going to put them out of work, and it's going to impact their souls negatively and just make them lazy. So why do we need the printing press? We don't need it. So then later when we have a plethora of novels, those corrupt your mind. Why do you need idle pleasure reading? That's just a waste of time. You should be out working with your hands. So then along comes electricity. We get the telegraph. That's the first use of electronic communication. And then the radio. That rapidly developed during World War I and World War II and then came into the homes. So one way I like to think about this is, y'all ever see Downton Abbey? I'm the only woman in here, so it may just be me. So one of the young family members named Rose, she decides to invest in a wireless radio. Lord Grantham, he's the head of the family. He sees this new device as a menacing intruder from this new age that he just doesn't want around. But she convinces him, they bring it out, I think, at a Christmas party, and he thinks it's going to get tucked away afterwards, but it does become a central part of their lives. The telephone, again, makes you lazy and breaks up your home life. That's what people said when the telephone came out. Again, back to Downton Abbey, most people's favorite character is the Dowager Countess, that's Lord Grantham's mother. And she says, is this an instrument of communication or of torture? She explains this when trying to make a phone call. And then Mrs. Patmore, she's in charge of the kitchen staff downstairs. And when the phone's ringing off the hook downstairs, she says it sounds like the cry of a banshee. They just can't take that noise, dreadful noise, doesn't belong in their homes. So then we get to the age of television. It rots your mind. And then social media, I don't even think we have a mind left to rot at this point, according to some people. So we've come a long way. But the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it's taken place. In all of these forms of communication, people are doing what I'm doing right now. I'm talking to you. But is there really communication going on unless you're able to communicate back to me? Whether it's through body language, verbal communication, if you were to write me a note, however you decide to communicate. So, to make sure we do have communication in this, there's going to be some give and take if y'all are willing to answer questions and interact. So we have the generations. For the sake of this talk, I'm going back to baby boomers. I'm not going back farther than baby boomers to the greatest generation. There really isn't a lot of data about their use on social media. And I'm also going to be speaking within the confines of American culture, since that's what I know best, and this varies greatly across the globe. So, which generation do you think you guys are? Who in here, I'm not going to put the dates up yet, but who in here thinks that they're a baby boomer? You already told me. All right, what about our Gen Xers? Okay, we got our Gen Xers. How about our Millennials? And Gen Z. Okay, y'all are pretty on it.
What is Bob?
He's greatest generation. He's before boomers.
Pre-baby boomer.
He's a pre-baby boomer.
Are you sure about that?
He told me what year he was born in. Yes, I'm sure.
1941, right?
They don't have. I'm sorry, they don't have data on your use of social media by the greatest generation. So.
You had us under Pony Express.
Yeah. So the icons on here depict which type of technology was ingrained in the lives of these generations when they were young. So my mom, for instance, is a baby boomer. She never knew life without a telephone in her home. And then Gen X, my husband's a Gen Xer. They're also known as the MTV generation, back when MTV actually was music television. And so forth. So like I have a 13-year-old daughter, she's a Gen Zer, and she doesn't really remember life without a cell phone around. And then Millennials. We get the brunt of negativities these days. Many people have a skewed idea of who a millennial is. They think that they're teenagers or they're our young college students who are our main student body here at the college, but that's wrong. So here's just a breakdown. You guys got it right. Millennials are in their mid-20s up to the oldest millennial this year will be turning 39. So next year the millennial generation will turn 40. So, but understand that these dates on here, they fluctuate. You can look up when these generations start and it's going to vary. Some put the millennial generation starting as far back as 1976, and some put it as, on the other side, as late as like 1983. So it kind of varies. These were just the numbers I went with. And it's still loading because those are high res, but it's just loading slow. No. So we have our baby boomers born between 1946 and 64, the Gen Xers. The Gen Ys are millennial. When I was a kid, our generation was called Gen Y. I actually didn't know I was a millennial until I was in grad school. And there were some millennials on the younger end of our generation, and that's when I kind of realized that I'm one of them. Okay, it was a lot to take in. I thought I was a Gen Xer. Actually, I'm a Zennial. I'm on the cusp. I was born in February of '82. So people, they're kind of bridge the two generations between Gen X and Millennials. But they're called Zennials, and I like to think that I possess the best qualities of both generations and none of the negatives. So. And then after Gen Z, they are already named the next generation Gen Alpha. I have a 20-month-old at home, so she's Gen Alpha. We'll see if that sticks. I'm sure the dates will change a bit, and the names will probably change as well. Same for Gen Z. You guys might not be called Gen Z 10 years from now. So everyone got their stuff right. So these generations, we have stereotypes and ideas of what we think each generation is. So where do these stereotypes come from? Does it come from our upbringing, from our interactions? Do y'all have any ideas about where these generational stereotypes, why they're so ingrained, and where they come from? Any thoughts?
Cultural influence.
Mm-hmm.
The stuff that we're exposed to is going to define who we are as people, whether we know it or not.
Right.
Constant bombardment, advertisements, things going on, social events, global conflict, anything that we're aware of is going to define the way we behave and interact as people.
Right, right. But one thing that the generations have in common, no matter what age we are, in the year 2020, 80+% of everyone in all of these generations use social media of some form. And they prefer visuals over blocks of text. They don't want to pick up just a traditional book with black text on a white background. Well, if they do, they'll pick up a book. But if they're on social media, they want something visually interesting to them. So, in the spirit of visual interest, I present you some memes, because that is the way we communicate these days, right? So, here are a collection of some memes that I see our baby boomers, like my mom, will post. You have age tests, claims that us millennials can't read cursive. I should have written in cursive, I normally do. I do write in cursive. Do you guys write in cursive?
Some.
Some?
It's a
No.
pretty good, that's good handwriting.
Oh, thank you.
I think our class was the last class we taught cursive, and then they're slowly bringing it back.
Yeah, so my 13-year-old daughter cannot write in cursive. She knows how to write her name, but that's it. So we're gonna have to work on that. And then the so glad I grew up doing this, not this. But then we get into Gen X. My husband, as I said, is a Gen Xer, and this describes him to a T. They're very nonchalant. I guess that'd be the nice word to put it. And again, this is generalization. There's always exceptions to this rule, but this is kind of what people think of the generation of the Gen Z. They're just kind of sitting back, laughing at everything going on, and not caring, and not having any feelings. And then Millennials. Oh, it's not gonna load. I feel like Carlton right there. This is like dial-up internet right here. So you guys know dial-up, you had to wait until someone was off the phone to get on the internet?
I'm aware of it.
You're aware of it, yes. So there's a great meme up there about avocado toast and being the reason that millennials can't buy houses because we spend too much of our money on avocado toast is up there. So while that loads, we cling or resist this generational assignment that we're put into. Like I said, when I found out that I was a millennial, I was very resistant. I was like, I'm a Gen X. There's no way I'm a millennial. I can't be. I'm not, this avocado toast eating, always putting pretty pictures on Instagram every 5 seconds of my life type of person. But that's just a stereotype. There's just this big variety of how people act within a generation. So I was gonna split the room in half left and right. I'm still gonna do that, but I'm just gonna flip. So I'm dividing the room based on where you're sitting. You guys over here, you're all baby boomers now. And you guys over here, you're all millennials. So your idea of who you are is now changed. How does that make you feel? Now you have all of the stereotypes that come with being a baby boomer now apply to you. Okay, boomer. Right? And all of the stereotypes that go with being a millennial over here, ungrateful, entitled, still live with your parents when you're 35, because you're paying off your student loans you shouldn't have taken out in the first place. That all applies to you. So how does that make you feel, just be pushed into that box? I didn't like it. I don't think anybody would like it.
If you don't mind me asking, I've got two questions for you. Number one, I've heard the term echo boomers a lot. I'd like you to tell me what that is because I'm not really sure what it is. And then the second thing is, why do you think there are so many generalizations? Because I can think of my high school class in 1989, and everybody was so different, as diverse in every way. So why do we now, this many years later, think that these generations are all the same when you look at any high school class, you look at any group of people, and there's outgoing people, there's not outgoing people, there's lazy people, there's hardworking people, there's everything.
Right.
So surely it couldn't be that generalized within a whole generation.
And it's not, but I think that social media has a way of, if you have an idea in your head, it's just like with politics. If you have an idea in your head that millennials are entitled, then you're going to seek out that information that tries to prove that until someone says, but your child's a millennial, didn't you raise them better? Like, well, my kid's the exception to that rule.
Yeah.
So it's just these generalizations, and I think the way that we communicate online with memes to poke fun at ourselves and to try to poke fun at other generations has, to some extent, made those generalizations stronger.
Well, rather than being that different, isn't it more of a state of mind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than being that different, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the way we grow up in our generations. We have such vastly different experiences, and a lot of that is due to the amount of technology and the way we communicate. So it makes one generation uncomfortable when the next generation doesn't communicate in a way that they're familiar.
Well, that's what I was gonna say when you were asking before about, what creates some of this, and when you said, the other thing is I think it's what technology is available when you're in roughly high school.
Mhm.
Is kind of what shapes, because high school for me, pre-internet. High school for me,
Right.
whereas, I think the next generation becomes high school, there starts to be internet, that type of thing. So I think and then high school for the next generation is smartphones all over the place,
Right,
And to me, I've always kind of had this feeling that you kind of get locked into the type of music you listen to, middle school to high school, the technology, that's what you're most familiar with and all of that.
We really do find our comfort level around that age. And I think I
That's why I love 80s music even to
Right.
today,
And I noticed that whatever music you listen to up to age 30 is pretty much what you listen to the rest of your life. I listen to very little current pop music. The only reason I know it is because it's what my daughter listens to, and so that's how I learned the current songs. But really, most music that I listen to was recorded before I turned 30, and that's just what I'm comfortable with. It's not nostalgia. So I had to Google Echo Boomer, I'll admit. It's a child of a baby boomer, of a post-World War II baby boom generation, born approximately from the mid-70s to the late 90s.
Okay.
So it's another way to divide the generations down.
Thank you.
It's like the late children of baby
Yeah.
boomers.
So you guys get this one from Saturday Night Live, like the best skit
Okay.
ever.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna be living in a van down by the river, and the millennials say, what kind of van are we talking about? So that's where we're at.
The question I was going to ask is,
Talking about, communication, it's right here.
the question I was going to ask is, what caused all the generations to converge onto social media, make it so attractive?
So, can you wait like 2 slides and I'm gonna get into that?
Oh, all right.
Yeah, so,
Good question.
yes. So I was talking about the way that the generations communicate change. I based a lot of these off of what I see my 13-year-old putting out there. You guys as Gen Zers are a little older than her, so y'all may have a different experience, but you guys understand these, right? Y'all understand most of these
I think that
memes?
sandwich one's the best.
Yeah. Do you guys over here understand any of these?
No.
Like,
Only because I have a 16.
I want to be Tracer, I'm already Tracer, TikTok
Oh,
users.
that was awful.
Yeah, that's overused. And then oops. If you don't have a 13-year-old in your house, you probably don't. I don't even know what that means.
We don't even know what that means.
Yeah.
It's a Visco girl.
Visco girl. So a lot of the memes, and a lot of the, whenever my daughter says, look at this meme, she means watch this video. So to them, memes are videos now. A lot of these are based off of videos. I'm glad I didn't try to load a video because this was taking long enough. And then Gen Z culture is debating if it's milk before cereal or vice versa in class. And then having one kid go up and say, I put bleach before my cereal. And then dabbing as the rest of the class laughs and goes same while your Gen X teacher looks horrified. Because this is the Tide Pod eating generation, right? That's what you guys do for fun. That's what the internet says, you eat Tide Pods. So it must be true.
It's a heavily dark humor
Yes,
generation, extremely.
very, very
Well,
dark
and I
humor.
think that goes to what somebody over there said about being like a mindset. Like that, especially it's developed in the phrase "okay boomer." So
Mhm.
now we're not just talking about an age gap. We're talking about a specific mindset that they have towards a younger generation.
Right, so I do use the word boomer in here some as shortened for baby boomer on the slide. I don't mean it that way, but if you guys are familiar with the okay boomer, that's pertaining to a person of any age who has a mindset where they think that they're being old-fashioned and not with the current trends. My daughter says okay boomer to me or okay Karen all the time. And that's another thing I saw today. It says, sorry Gen X, the Gen Zers are now calling you the Karen generation.
Yeah.
So what's the Karen thing about?
So have you ever heard of the Karen haircut? It's the haircut, it's like let me speak to your manager haircut. So there's all these memes where anytime there's someone complaining or just being overly uptight, they're like, okay, Karen. Okay, Karen, just take a breath. And so now I feel sorry for people named Karen because their name's been turned into a verb at this point.
Yes.
To Karen, to be a Karen. Yeah. So, we find for items.
Yeah, I think the constant tension between older and younger generations is just a growing up thing.
Yeah,
I think all of us, when we were in our teenage years, there was such a gap between parents and grandparents. We're like, I'm never gonna be like that, I'm never gonna be like that.
right.
Then we get like that.
Yes, oh no, I'm already turning into my mom. It's scary, but. So online, especially on Facebook, which is heavily used by our baby boomer generation and our millennials, there's this ongoing battle of memes, of posts about, oh, millennials are entitled and boomers ruined the economy for us and it's why we can't afford a house. And so it's a back and forth. And meanwhile, my Star Wars loving husband, who's a Gen Xer, loves this. Gen X is in the middle just saying, I'm glad I'm not in the middle of this. Being a baby boomer culture is having your phones ring at maximum volume in a dead silent room and spending 30 seconds looking at the screen before silencing it. I'll add to this during church. And millennial culture is not knowing that your own ringtone sounds like because your phone's been on vibrate since 2009. It's true. It's true.
Were you there that Sunday when some lady's ringtone went off and it was Amazing Grace? It went off for like 30 seconds. It was so funny.
At least it was Amazing Grace.
Yeah.
Another change in the culture, you'll have like a baby boomer says, I heard she went to therapy. And then the millennials and the Gen Zers are like, let me tell you guys all over social media on my public profile what I talked about with my therapist today. So this one I actually like because it shows a change. I'm a big proponent of mental health. So I really kind of like to see this change here because it shows that we are a lot more open to talking about topics online that really need to be brought to light.
That it's okay for people to have problems. Yeah.
Right. So a lot of what causes these divisions right here is the way that we communicate, especially when we view that different form of communication as wrong. So I didn't put this up here, but it's a little screenshot from a Reddit. So the first person says, Dear cashier in America, the proper response to thank you is you're welcome, not no problem. And you're supposed to thank me. And the next person says, millennials are so entitled, and then the person next down explains this. The you're welcome, no problem issue is a linguistics misunderstanding. And I'll add, based on a generational divide. Older people tend to say, you're welcome. Younger people tend to say, no problem. This is because for older people, the act of helping or assisting someone was instilled in them as this is a task that you're supposed to do that's not expected of them, but in doing it, it's extra. So it's saying, I accept your thanks because I know I deserve it. Thank you for thanking me. Saying no problem, however, is because younger people have been raised to feel that not only helping someone or assisting them is given, that it's a given and it's expected, but it should also be stressed that you don't need to thank me for helping you. It was no burden to me. I was glad to do it. So older people think that help is a gift you give, while younger people think help is an expectation required of them. So whenever you have an older person who gets upset because you didn't say you're welcome instead of no problem, it's not the younger person being rude to you, it's just different in linguistics based on their generation. Yes?
Have you ever heard of, do you think that this is still a pretty common trend where there's a situation like a burglary and stuff like that, and it's kind of like across the middle of a road? I'm just giving a scenario, but it was something that actually did happen in the news where there's a burglar who actually broke in and it was in a very busy intersection, and they said, that's not my problem. And there were cars passing by and stuff.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Do you think that's still very common, or do you think that's gotten less?
I'm not an expert on that. I would assume or guess that maybe that depends on where you live and how urban an area you live in. I think Weatherford's a little more tight-knit. I don't think it would have as high a probability of happening here as it maybe it would in Dallas, where you don't know your neighbors and maybe you're a little more scared to get to know them. So, okay. All these things to say, you have to keep perspective. That's one of my 3 keys up here, perspective. Kids these days will never know the struggle. Only 6,000 DC kids will remember this. There's always nostalgia for the way things were done once upon a time. And the other thing to remember is that let he who is without sin cast the first stone. We have over here a group of baby boomers sitting idly on their telephone rather than talking to each other, and someone called them stupid millennials because they're glued to their screens. And remember, we've all been young and we've all been dumb. We've made questionable choices when it comes to fashion and our hair. And we've always had issues with substances being abused in ways that they shouldn't be, even in the 80s and before. So, most importantly, for millennials and Gen Zs, all of these bad choices up here, we put them out for the world to see because we video them, we record them, and we catalog them. But for our Gen Xers and our baby boomers, they've already burned the negatives. So it's harder to prove that they could say, we never did that, but really they did. They just didn't have social media to put it on, to share it with everybody. So how do we bridge this divide that we've created? If one does not understand a person, one tends to regard him as a fool. How often do we see that in online communication, where someone comes in and starts trolling a conversation, calling someone an idiot, a fool, because they're have a different perspective. You don't know who you're communicating with. It's such a global world online. The person you're speaking to may be from another country. They may not have the same education, economic upbringing, culture, the same religion. There's a whole lot of things that you have to keep in mind. And most of this does happen on Facebook. I'm going to focus on that for a bit. So Facebook started as a platform right after I got out of college. I just missed it. But at that time, you could only be on Facebook if you were a college student. Now it's the #1 social media site for baby boomers. So it's changed quite a bit over the last 15 years. It's also the main stage where we see those memes that I posted where our millennials and our boomers have their little back and forth. So as an aside, when we talk online, we storytell a lot. And storytelling is the foundation of our human interaction, whether it's a verbal communication or written communication. And to do that successfully, we have to create a meaningful dialogue, which involves perspective and empathy. And that doesn't go away when we're online talking with strangers. And I think a lot of times we forget that. Storytelling develops and reflects our culture, which is a great place to go on social media to learn about other people's perspectives and cultures, to broaden our own minds and knowledge. It also unveils friendships. It frames challenges, establishes values, and identifies ideologies. I'm friends on Facebook with people I've met once in my life or that I went to high school with, who I'm now great friends with, who I never realized I had so much in common with. So there's a lot of good that can come from social media. On the flip side, it's allowed us to create bubbles where we tend to just interact with those who are like us. It also helps us engage in a mob-like mentality when someone does something we deem inappropriate or wrong, or they're not like us. So our idea of what is ethical in online communication varies greatly depending on our age, our culture, and a whole slew of other demographics. So there's a great challenge in outlining some kind of ethical standard to be used on such a global platform. In one of my graduate classes, I had to create an outline for what I call the Golden Rule Ethical Framework for Social Media. I focused it on humaneness, that you can find as the founding principle in Confucianism, and then I also added in the need for diversity, truth, and harmony to create a great platform for global communication. So again, the Golden Rule is central to that. Actually, a couple of years ago, I had to step back and use social media less. I used to get into these online debates and conversations about really important topics with people, and it caused so much stress and anxiety, this feeling I had that I had to get on and respond and provide sources to, really legitimate profiles and pages to support my view on whatever it was we were discussing. And then they were so mean in return, like they just didn't have the golden rule. So going back to mental health, I was seeing a counselor for my anxiety, and she said, Crystal, you have this expectation that people should be up here and really through down here. And you just need to understand that they're never going to meet your expectations. Even though everyone should follow this golden rule, unfortunately they don't. So I stopped posting about controversial things on social media, and I am much better off for it. So, understanding, I'm not going to read through all of these. This is from a different presentation I did that was more towards some business leaders in our community that I gave at Lions Club about how to use social media to interact, to connect with different cultures who might buy their products. But one thing that's important here is only 26% of internet using baby boomers say they feel very confident with using electronic devices. But at the same time, they are 19% more likely to share content than any other generation.
Wow.
So what do we see our baby boomer family members and friends online, sharing online? Or if you guys are on Facebook and see, what do you see them sharing a lot of?
Political stuff.
Political stuff. And is it always accurate?
No.
That'll love being in the onion.
Right. So a lot of that is, you have to think like my mom, again, going back to my mom, they got a TV when she was like in 4th grade. There were 3 channels on it. There were 3 news sources. And they had a much higher quality, or higher line for ethics back then. Now anyone can be a journalist. I used to be a journalist, a real one. You can't make a living at it anymore. Everyone thinks that they can go out and get what they think are facts and put them online, and because I put it online and put my byline on it, it must be true, even if it just serves my agenda.
The problem was they revoked a rule in 1985. It was kind of like an impartiality rule, and the Supreme Court ruled that a journalist had to follow. But prior to that, average journalists actually had to follow that rule. But as a result of revoking that rule, it's kind of like all heck breaks loose.
Yeah, free for all.
So
So also, you're only really gonna, you're really gonna just find baby boomers for the most part on Facebook. They do use Pinterest. My mom loves Pinterest, and LinkedIn for business, but they really stick to Facebook. They don't always understand the nuances between the different platforms. And honestly, I will say when I first started using the different platforms for what I do, I had a little trouble with it because I had to understand that the way I use Snapchat and Instagram is completely different from Facebook because I'm communicating with a different generation. And they view the material differently. They want visuals more than a bunch of text. So Gen X, they don't like to post their personal lives on Facebook. So I went to the University of North Texas for my undergrad, and I'm in Bruce Hall, one of the dormitories there, talking with my friends. And back then we used this old-fashioned thing called AOL Instant Messenger, or AIM. It's a little chat box on your computer. And so I'm in the dorm one day, and they're talking about this thing called LiveJournal. Anyone hear of LiveJournal? Anyone? Yeah. It's before MySpace. Actually, the first social media platform was Friendster. LiveJournal was second. And so they're telling me it's this, you go on and you put these journal entries in, it was just text on a white background, and your friends can see it and comment on it, and you have this group discussion, and I'm like, you have AOL, you have AIM to communicate with. This was also before texting, just FYI. Like, why do you need LiveJournal? That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. There's no way that's gonna last, it's just a fad. And now my job is managing over 24 social media profiles for the college across 6 or 7 different social media channels, so I was wrong. Let's see here. So because of this, because of their early adoption of using LiveJournal, I think that the Gen Xers learned to be private, a lot more private on social media. They were in chat rooms in the 90s, they were on LiveJournal, they were on MySpace when it came out. Now with Facebook and the other platforms, they're a lot more private about their personal lives. They're not as likely to put their face even in their profile photos. Many of my Gen X friends use fake last names. They use their real first name, they use a fake last name. I have a friend, CJ, he's a professor up in Vermont. He changed his profile photo for the first time since 2009, a few months ago. And he's a little more tenured looking than I remember. I haven't seen him in person since college. So all I've had to go on is this photo from 2009 until he updated his picture about 6 months ago. So it was nice to see him then. Millennials. Millennials are twice as likely as any other generation to turn to social media to communicate with a brand. So when I have a problem with a company, I'm not picking up the telephone. I'm going on to their Twitter or to their Facebook page, and I will try to send a private message first. I'm not going to go on. I know there are some of those people that will just go on and publicly send messages to bash a company because they're upset with them. But honestly, a lot of people my age and younger, I jump when my phone rings in my office a lot of the times. I used to be a phone person. I grew up typical 90s girl on the telephone for hours with my friends. But now, because the vast majority of my work is done typing, I'm constantly having a string of thoughts go from my head out my fingertips, and when the phone rings, it just completely derails that. So I prefer email for work communication and social media communication for my friends. Because I can get back to them when I'm done with whatever task that I'm trying to complete, rather than completely stop, lose my train of thought, pick up the phone. So when I have a problem in a company, I try to do the same thing I would want. The golden rule, again, I treat others the way I want them to treat me. So I try to send them an email or message them on social media to communicate with them. And in order to keep the customers my age and younger, those companies are having to adapt to that type of communication as well. Back up at the top about the personal information, I skipped over this. Millennials have also been called the Instagram generation. They want to show off their life, or a version of their life anyway, through pictures. There are articles out there about how it's fake, about how millennials who use Instagram put up this fake life. And it's not that it's fake, it's just that it's the good snippets. There's no requirement that we put the bad along with the good. Whereas the Gen Z generation, what I'm finding is that you guys, or the younger ones in your generation, you guys use Snapchat the way that millennials use Instagram for the most part. Do you guys use Snapchat? No? Okay, not these guys. Do y'all use social media?
Nope.
It's an interesting group. Yeah.
Well, I do, the only social media I really go on to is YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube, yeah. Okay, yeah. Twitter.
Top one.
Old school, yes. So Gen Z, again, this is you guys and younger, you are more likely to turn on YouTube than the television. That's true. I can't even tell you the last time my daughter turned on the actual television. She watches YouTube and TikTok. YouTube.
I
TikTok.
will, I'm just gonna send a warning about TikTok is they can actually get your data and send it to a foreign country without you really.
Yeah.
Chinese spider.
I'm serious.
No, yeah. So whereas the other generations use social media to communicate with one another, I post pictures of my kid online for my mom to see. She's like, oh, look at my cute granddaughter. Share pictures, how's so-and-so? We communicate through these pictures. Gen Z, they're using social media for entertainment. They're getting on YouTube and TikTok. They're trying to make up these challenges that we see. Some of them are kind of cool. The only ones that seem to get the spotlight in the news are the Tide Pod Challenge, or what is that, Skull Crusher Challenge I saw recently? That terrified me, where they're kicking the legs out of kids and they're hitting their head on the concrete. Some kid almost died. Not all of them are that bad, but it's just to try to get popularity, to get their, not even 15 minutes of fame. These videos are 15 seconds long on TikTok. It's 15 seconds of fame to try to go viral. And it's not so much to communicate with their peers, it is to provide a source of entertainment. So how do we communicate with this generation? I'm still trying to figure out. If you guys have any tips, you can let me know.
Crystal, when in our office, we have you and two other ladies that are similar age to Crystal. They're all millennials. I'm talking about Katie and Chelsea. And I was surprised, for a while, I was the only one before that even had a television in our home. That the rest didn't even have a television. You guys all, when you relax at night, you're watching YouTube, you're watching Netflix on your devices, and didn't have TV. Of the 5 people in my house before my 2 boys went to college, I was the only one that ever watched television. Everybody else just goes to their phones, really. They're watching their phones. And so, and then you see the statistics of network television and local television, fewer and fewer and fewer people are watching that every year. It's really changed. And everybody used to come home and watch the news at night, the 6 o'clock news. And
I haven't had cable or regular local television since 2009. I've been on streaming platforms. Well, for a few years there, I just had nothing because, I was a millennial and I was broke. So I didn't have, it was cable or groceries, so I didn't have TV for a few years.
I actually am one, this is gonna sound bizarre, but I'm actually one that, my parents still own a television. I kind of watch a combination of television, YouTube, and I even do a bit of e-reading and books. So I kind of have a weird mix.
Yeah.
Well, because I think most people are starting to like, they're starting to realize that, I mean, like you said, like television's expensive. I mean, like my family's DirecTV bill is nearly $100 a month, and we're about to get rid of it.
Yeah.
Because we can have Netflix, Amazon Video, Hulu for half the price of that, and it has so much more options as far as entertainment. I mean, they're releasing their own movies on the platform, their own television shows that appear weekly. I mean, it's just, there's so many more options for so little money.
And then so many of those streaming services have a social component where you can go and rate the show and leave comments about what you thought. So word of mouth has always been a big factor when it comes to having a successful business. It still is, even more so today, but that word of mouth is digital word of mouth. It's reviews that
Instantaneous.
are left on a Amazon item that you're gonna go and buy. I research everything before I buy it. I go and read reviews. If I'm interested in a new show that's on Netflix, is it really worth my time? Oh, there's reviews, let me see what other people thought. It even has an algorithm that says, based on your previous things you've watched, we're 98% sure you're gonna like this show. So why wouldn't I go to Netflix or Hulu to watch TV rather than try to sit and click through an old-fashioned television and catch a show that's already been on for 10 minutes and I missed the first part of it?
Yeah. I think that's part of it.
It's all about subscription, a lot of it's all about subscriptions now.
Yeah.
On the internet, you're already paying
So,
for it.
as far as the platform use going, once again, we're seeing communication change and evolve. Since social media began really, as I said, a text-only platform, then it went into video, photos, and now into video. So Gen Z, only 35% of Gen Zers use Facebook once a week. And then get ready, I'm gonna flip this to Snapchat. They're on Snapchat. It's quick, it's instant, it's usually video. This survey came out in July of last year, so I'm really interested in when it comes out again this summer if they're going to add TikTok to it. I couldn't really find any current or really substantial data about the use of TikTok, weekly habits based on generations. With all this talk of emerging platforms, we have to keep in mind that Facebook is still king. There are 2.89 billion people globally on Facebook. We're almost at 8 billion people population-wise, but if you take out those who are too young to be on Facebook, the breakout goes 15 and up, so Facebook is 13 and up. You're looking at roughly 6 billion people worldwide are of age to be on Facebook, and half of them are. That's across all ages. Whether or not they use it once a week or daily, that varies. But even my Gen X or Gen Z daughter has a Facebook page that she gets on a few times a month and interacts with her grandparents on and sends them stuff and communicates with them. It is the largest communication platform we have. Something like this has never existed before. And we have so much good that we can do with it if we just remember to have perspective, empathy, and follow the golden rule. So, any questions that we haven't covered? No?
I think you did really good.
So I was curious about something. What happens if there's always been a huge debate, like peak tech used to be where a lot of the adult, like the kind of like a worship kind of a deal. And some people in the perspective think that it's gotten too big. I know that. What would happen if all those platforms were broken out?
Like which platform? The Facebook ones that they own? So yeah, Facebook owns Instagram and WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger. So there has been talk about it being a monopoly. I don't know. I mean, we don't pay, I kind of think of a monopoly as being something that you have to go and pay for, and because there's only one company, like AT&T was a monopoly at one point, they broke them up because they were able to raise your phone prices because you didn't have anywhere else to go. It doesn't cost me anything to use Facebook or Instagram. Now it costs me whenever I'm working for the college and I have to place, when I put posts up because I have to boost them in order for them to be seen. That's how they make their money. I don't know that it's an exorbitant cost. It's a very effective way to advertise for very little. It's a lot more affordable than
Yeah, but there's also the debate in front of the FCC and stuff like that right now, that the reason it is like that is because they buy up all the competitors that may possibly be able to compete with them. I mean, that's what Google, Google, Facebook, that all these different companies that bought up. Before they can possibly compete with them, they've already bought them, and so,
So it's a question, is it too big, or is it a good thing that it's big?
Right.
So it allows almost
And
3
that's the debate
billion
right now.
people to communicate with one another in an easy way, or is that too big, and do they need to be broken up?
That's actually become a business strategy. People will start something hoping a bigger company will pay them a lot of money for it.
Right, they start something and hope it'll be a success.
Because,
They can make money off of it.
because the way I've seen it is, smaller businesses and stuff now are using the network of bigger services like Amazon and Google to kind of connect with their population and get their services and products out there. And so it's kind of interesting to me, I think.
Yeah.
Amazon's the one that's been buying up everybody.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.